Greetings, everyone. This is Kokou. Hope you guys can hear me. Drop a one in the chat if you can. The reason why I'm asking to drop a one is because I am broadcasting using a different setup today. Um, had a little setback, couldn't get home in time, so I'm using a mobile device to do my show today. So it's important to know if I can, in fact, be heard. I'm not even sure if there's folks here right now. Um, Let me just bear with me a second. Let me see if I can figure this out. Just bear with me a second. But for those of you who are here with me, I appreciate anyone that is here with me. Again, if you can hear me, drop a one in the chat. That will help me to know that you guys can hear me. I'm in a strange little situation here where I can't get even my computer to work properly right now. Yeah, I'm not getting feedback. So, okay. Apparently, How Charlie Podcast, The Learning Curve right here. I'm getting a one. Thank you guys for letting me know. So, Thursday Thoughts show. We're talking about imposter syndrome. And we're talking about imposter syndrome. And what I wanted to get across to you guys before we started, we're going to talk about what it means to have imposter syndrome. We're going to talk about persons with imposter syndrome. There's actually 5 types of imposterisms. We're going to talk about why you should confront imposter syndrome. We're going to talk about imposter syndrome in terms of Black equals African people. And I'm going to give you all my 10 thoughts or 10 solutions on it as well. So what we'll start the show now. On the other side, we will begin this discussion, if you will.
You are listening to the Bitter Medicine Podcast on KWAZ Radio. Welcome to the Bitter Medicine Podcast, where it's all about Black empowerment. Our show focuses on Black news and entertainment, arts, science, economics, history, people, and strategies that uplift, empower, and motivate Africans within the diaspora. And now, your host, whose favorite color is black, Kokou.
Welcome back to the Bitter Medicine Podcast. I am your host, Kokou. Just want to remind you guys before we get the show rolling that this show is part of a podcast network called KWAZ Radio. There are other shows on the network you are invited to tune into.
This is D Webb with the Harsh Reality Podcast, asking you to tune in where we tackle the news of the day that affects our community, only on KWAZ Radio.
Peace, family. This is Oni, inviting you to listen to the Pro-Black Perspective, where Black problems are addressed with Black solutions.
Greetings, fam. Tune in to The Learning Curve with me, the revolutionary matron on KWAZ Radio.
You are listening to the Bitter Medicine Podcast on KWAZ Radio.
Yes, indeed. Welcome back to the Bitter Medicine Podcast. As I mentioned at the start of the show, before the intro, that I'm using a much different setup today. Couldn't get home in time, so I'm on mobile. Hopefully, the sound quality is fine, and we can get through this without any problems. I want to thank you guys for tuning in. Thank you guys for tuning into the Thursday Thoughts Show. Again, today we're discussing imposter syndrome. I see the pro-black perspective says, never heard of this imposter thing. That's interesting. Yeah, it's been around for a while. The learning curve says it's a thing. We talked about the quote unquote idea of it in the early 2000s at my PWI. So, what is imposter syndrome? Why does it matter? As a matter of fact, I mentioned this on Shoot the Breeze this past Saturday. You guys should tune in to that last episode. There are chapters now, so you can jump from topic to topic on YouTube. So check out that feature as well. KW Don 7 is here saying peace. Peace to you, KW Don 7. Thanks for coming through. Make sure you guys hit the like button. Let's make sure we have the likes represent the number of people here. So imposter syndrome. What does it mean to have imposter syndrome? Imposter syndrome is loosely defined as doubting your abilities and feeling like a fraud. Doubting your abilities, feeling like a fraud. What it is actually, though, it's just persistent inability to believe that your success is deserved or has been legitimately achieved as a result of your own efforts or skills. People who struggle with imposter syndrome believe that they are undeserving of their achievements and the high esteem in which they are, in fact, generally held. So a lot of people who you see in positions of power, positions of notoriety, a lot of them deep down suffer from imposter syndrome, right? They feel undeserving. They see all these people admiring them, and they see all these people holding them to a certain status, right? But deep down inside, they don't feel worthy of it. And a part of that has to do with the fact that they're humans just like the rest of us are humans. A lot of your celebrity people are this way. We recently had a Miss USA, a black woman, black equals African woman, jump off of a building and kill herself. You know, so a lot of these folks are out here smiling with you. A lot of the people around you are smiling with you, but a lot of them don't feel like they deserve, at least those who are being held in some kind of high esteem. A lot of them don't feel like they deserve it. A lot of people actually feel like they aren't as competent or intelligent as others might think they are. And that soon enough, people will discover the truth about them. And that discovery that people who suffer from imposter syndrome, that leads to a lot of anxiety. And full disclosure, I've had moments of feeling like an imposter. And I'll talk about that a little bit later on. Some of you might have had that feeling as well. And if you are willing to, you can share if you've ever felt that way. There's a reason why some people groups in particular will feel imposter syndrome. Or I should say it another way. There's reasons why different people groups will have the feeling of imposter syndrome because of the different circumstances that different people groups have to live through. And we'll talk about that in a second. A lot of times, like I said before, people who suffer imposterism, they are well accomplished. They might hold high offices. They oftentimes have numerous degrees. You'll see that a lot from Black folks. Black folks are perpetual students in these colleges. I remember when I came up here to go to college, I met folks in college at the time who were like 30 something, 40 in college, coming back to get a second or third master's, this time in mathematics or chemistry or whatever they think is that thing, that subject area that they could go and thrive in, right? And Black folks are big on that sufferation, you know. The pro-Black perspective put up a symbol. I don't know what that is, But that's something that we have to be aware of as well, right? Um, whether it be areas of academic achievement or career success, a person can struggle with pressure and personal expectations. And there's an important message there for our children. I'll touch on that a little bit later. Underneath the facade that we've been talking about, there's often a lack of confidence. And if you remember something, you remember that the Honorable Marcus Garvey said that if you haven't confidence in self, you are twice defeated in the race of life. With confidence, you have won even before you have started. So this will take us to discussing who are the persons with imposterism. Who are persons with imposterism? Hopefully, I gave a good idea of what it is and how it can manifest and how you can identify it in others too. But persons with imposterism, a lot of persons with imposterism attribute their accomplishments to external or momentary causes, such as luck, good timing, right place, right time, or effort that they cannot regularly expend, even though there could be an abundance of evidence of their success. But let's read that one more time. Let me say that one more time. Persons with imposterism tend to attribute their accomplishments to external or momentary causes, such as luck, good timing, like right place, right time, or effort that they cannot regularly expect. Persons with imposterisms usually come from competitive environments, right? The competitive environments tend to be the groundwork for their imposterism. For example, intense pressure about academic achievement from your parents during childhood, that can cause an imposter syndrome. Another example, um, what about if you came from inhospitable lands? What if you came from environments where you had food scarcity, cold climates? Mm. You know who I'm getting at when I say that. And I mentioned this on Shoot the Breeze. These folks who are our enemies, oftentimes they have imposter syndrome. And what we've been seeing since the early 2000s, late 90s, we've been seeing how they oftentimes cope with that imposter syndrome. I mentioned the thriller sex the other day, where they just go around having wild, unprotected sex in hopes of getting something that could take them off the planet. We're talking about individual folks now, right? They have that kind of thing because they know that they really don't have the energies to regularly expend, right, to keep up the facade, right? They know that their accomplishments came from something else, a momentary time, a good luck, a good timing, right? You were able to massacre people and take their lands and enslave others and force them to build your institutions and your nation. A lot of these folks know deep down that's not their doing. And they have issues with coping with it. And so, it comes from a lot of that comes from who they originally were, where they originally came from. And that also, by the way, is a scarcity mindset. These folks are driven by the fact that they come from scarcity. They don't want to really have to go back to that. They know that it's through our ancestors that built up their nations and built their wealth and built their economies. They know that it wasn't them who did the shit, right? They know it wasn't them who did the shit. And so they feel a ways about that. Not all of them, some of them do. And I'm not trying to humanize a damn soul who's my enemy, by the way. Right? The learning curve says the joke here, did they create debt and residual income from insurance because they are not competitive? You know, they believe in passive income. They believe in being able to get residuals off of deals and all kind of stuff like that. They know that I can't necessarily blame them, but they know that they ain't trying to put up all that energy to keep this shit going. They have to have a way for it to work almost on autopilot. And our complicity in upholding their system helps them keep this shit on autopilot. Bobby E. Wright is here. You'll say what's up to Bobby E. Wright. Right? But yeah, like Garvey said, if you don't have confidence in self, you are twice defeated in the race of life. With confidence, you have won even before you have started. Right? So there's a bunch of stats behind this imposter syndrome stuff, but the two biggest stats are these: around 25 to 30% of high achievers may suffer from imposter syndrome. Again, and by the way, let me ask you guys who are here live with me directly: how many of you know of other Black equals African people who inexplicably have a gang of degrees to their name, right? Gang of degrees and certificates and this, that, and the other. How many of you know folks like that who are our people? I'd be shocked if there's one of you in here who doesn't know at least one other Black person who's like that. A lot of times that's an imposter syndrome. They're not comfortable in who they are. The other statistic is that 70% of adults may experience imposterism at least once in their lifetime. At least that's what research suggests. Persons with imposterism oftentimes suffer some type of addiction. If you go right down to West Virginia, which is predominantly white, a lot of those folks out there, and I've passed through that, a lot of those folks out there are strung out. Here in the New York area, you go to Long Island, a lot of those folks, our enemies, are strung out on drugs, and I'm not too sad about it either. Because when Black folks were strung out on crack back in the day, these folks were taking pictures and winning Pulitzer prizes and all sorts of shit, right? Watching our suffering. There's 5 types of imposterism. The 5 types of imposterism, let me pull this up. 5 types of imposterism is the perfectionist. How many of you are perfectionists? Let's have a moment here. Let's be honest with ourselves tonight. How many of you are perfectionists? I'm going to tell you, like I said before, I've suffered from imposterisms in my lifetime. And one of the biggest ways I've seen it in my lifetime is that I'm trying to do something. I'm trying to do it perfectly. A lot of that perfectionism stuff, a lot of that is procrastination in reality. A lot of that is just not trying to get to the point to have success. Because I'm gonna share something with y'all about Black folks when I get to Black folks in a second. When it comes to this imposterism too. The perfectionist represents a person with imposter syndrome that strives to be their absolute best, no matter the cost to their mental health. These individuals may be identified as typical perfectionists who set impossibly high standards for themselves. Again, I ask, do you know these folks? Well, I guess you know me, so you know you at least know one, right? You set these goals; they're lofty, right? Um, but really and truly, a lot of that is procrastination. The second type of imposterism is the superwoman or superman. The superwoman or superman represents a person with imposter syndrome that often struggles with work addiction. I said, people with imposterism usually suffer some type of addiction. This person may feel inadequate relative to colleagues and continue to push themselves as hard as possible, regardless of the consequences on mental, physical, and emotional health. The third type of imposterism is the natural genius. The natural genius represents a person with imposter syndrome that not only struggles with perfectionism, but also sets out to achieve lofty goals on their first try. These individuals feel unworthy, guilty, and shameful if they cannot easily complete a task or achieve a goal on their first go. I often feel that way. Real talk. I often feel that way. Fourth is the soloist. The soloist represents a person with imposter syndrome that has extreme difficulties asking others for help. Perhaps they may feel that others are not as competent as themselves, or that they must prove their own worth through their productivity. The learning curve, that's the revolutionary matron, says, Kokou, stop reading me. You see, matron is making my point, and I love the matron for doing that. You're making the point that a lot of black folks suffer this thing, and I'm going to talk about why in a few. The fifth imposterism is the expert. The expert represents a person with imposter syndrome that never feels good enough despite being extremely knowledgeable. This person may feel like they are less experienced than their colleagues if they do not know an answer or have knowledge on certain topics. I'll keep it real with y'all. Black folks in academia, I'm talking about folks with, the highest degree you can get. A lot of them are the expert imposters. Bobby E. Wright says in the chat says, I think we all have suffered from that syndrome. I know I have. Absolutely. The learning curve says done is better than perfect. We get stuck in the paralysis of analysis. Absolutely. Bobby E. Wright says Dr. Michael Eric Dyson and Cornel West come to mind. Exactly. They have other problems too, but yeah. The Harsh Reality Podcast says, yeah, I'm screwed. Yeah, I know D-Web is a dude with multiple degrees and certificates and all this kind of stuff. And guess what? I'm one of those guys too. But those are the 5 types of imposterism, right? I hope that you guys now can see it, if not only in yourselves, but see it in others. So why is it that we should confront imposter syndrome? Imposter syndrome can actually stifle the potential for growth and meaning by preventing people from pursuing new opportunities for growth, be it at work, in relationships, or around the hobbies that they have, right? By confronting imposter syndrome, you can help people continue to grow and thrive. Remember, I always talk about that abundance mindset. A lot of the reason why people can't get to that abundance mindset is because they feel like imposters. Imposter syndrome can create, in effect, a scarcity mindset. So let's put that back. Let's look at our enemies again who come from a scarcity system. They have a scarcity mindset. Of course, they also suffer from, not all, but many of them suffer from this imposter syndrome. Okay? But we need to talk about imposter syndrome as it relates to black people. And so, what I'm going to do, let's do a station ID break here. And on the other side, we will discuss imposter syndrome as it relates to black folks.
You are listening to the Bitter Medicine Podcast on KWAZ Radio.
This is D Webb with the Harsh Reality Podcast, asking you to tune in where we tackle the news of the day that affects our community, only on KWAZ Radio.
Peace, family. This is Oni, inviting you to listen to the pro-black perspective, where black problems are addressed with black solutions.
Greetings, fam. Tune in to The Learning Curve with me, the revolutionary matron on KWAZ Radio.
You are listening to the Bitter Medicine Podcast on KWAZ Radio.
Have you ever considered joining KWAZ Radio? Each of our hosts shares their unique perspective with you. You might have a perspective that needs to be shared. If that's true, hit us up at kwaz.radio@gmail.com. What are you gonna do? What you gonna do?
Yes, indeed. What are you gonna do? So we were talking about imposter syndrome. I want to thank you guys again for tuning in. I want to thank all of you guys in the chat for your contributions, for your comments, thoughts, etc. We're talking about imposter syndrome. I talked about what it is in general. I talked about why you should confront it, what it looks like in terms of people suffering with imposterism. But this is a show about black folks finding themselves. And so I want to talk about imposterism and black equals African people for a minute. A big reason why black equals African people would suffer from imposterism, especially here in the West, here in America, but really anywhere as it stands where there's black equals African people. A part of it is because you're in a white man's nation. Let's keep it real. Oh, and by the way, I don't care if you're in Ghana. I don't care if you're in Angola. I don't care if you're in the Congo. You're in a white man's nation. And the reason why I say that is because this white boy, this enemy that we have, controls your economy. And if he controls your economy, he controls your culture, he controls your education, etc., etc. You're in a white man's nation. You do not belong in this man's society. And they constantly remind you of this fact. Let me say that again. You find imposterism amongst black equals African people, it's because you are in a white man's nation. You don't belong in this man's society. And they constantly remind you of this. And I don't care if you're in Jamaica, you feel it. You're in the Bahamas, you feel it. You're in Angola, you're in the Congo, you're in the UK. Of course, if you're in America, Canada, you feel it regardless. Okay? Because these mofos will remind you of it. For example, when security following you around while you shopping, that's a reminder. When the cops could run up in your place and shoot you in your bed sleeping, that's a reminder. When there's lack of representation in the elected offices and in the media, that's a reminder. When there's when you look at the typical workplace dynamic, especially out here in America, I imagine in the UK as well, I imagine in Canada as well. That is a reminder. When folks got to be out here on this foolishness talking about Oscars so white and all that kind of shit, that's your reminder, right? Even if you look at work, even if you focus it in at work, the learning curve just says every day they remind you. Absolutely, right? Even if you focus on work, those of you who have to go into the plantation every day or 5 days a week, you see lack of representation in senior leadership roles. You see prejudiced attitudes in the workplace. You see your performance expectations are different. Like, for example, and you guys who are from America, you let me know if this is true for you guys too. But as a Caribbean person coming from an actual Caribbean country, right? When you come here, the older Caribbean folks always whisper to you, now you know you got to work twice as hard, right? You know that, right? So you guys let me know, those of you who are from the States, is that something that your parents or your guardians or whatever, or people around you said to you as well? Right? You always feel like you have to work 2 times harder to get half the credit. In the workplace, there's a lack of support. And again, there's a whole workplace dynamic, period. All these things are your everyday reminder that you don't belong here. And so remember when I talked about those folks who, when you listen to them, these guys have 3 PhDs, 4 master's degrees, a host of other certifications. And again, I'm kind of talking about myself too, right? That's because you feel inadequate and you feel like you have to get more knowledge, more this, more that. That's not necessarily an abundance type of mindset either, by the way. Because when you look at these folks out here, I'm talking about our enemies now. If you're talking about degrees, most time these guys and gals, these enemies of ours, they have a bachelor's degree. Who's the most educated demographic in America? I think they say it's black women. Right? Black women. When you look at who, yeah, so we're always on this, reminded of our place here. And if you're not careful, you'll always be trying to make yourself an equal to your enemy who doesn't even want you around. The pro-black perspective just said that twice as hard was on that show with black women sleeping with fake president. They played a scene on Twitter. I'm not sure what the show is, but I guess in this show that Oni's referring to, there was a scene with these black women, I guess, who basically demonstrated or stated that you have to work twice as hard, right? Black people who struggle with imposter syndrome share several common traits. Prevalent among these are self-doubt, fear of being exposed as a fraud, and an inability to own and internalize success. Other factors, other things, common traits you'll see is self-sabotage. And usually that self-sabotage comes by procrastination, negative self-talk, and perfectionism. Let me read that again. Let me say that again. Black people who struggle with imposter syndrome share several common traits. Prevalent among them would be self-doubt, fear of being exposed as a fraud, and an inability to own and internalize their success. Other common traits would be self-sabotage via procrastination, negative self-talk, and perfectionism. The reality of it is, and I hinted at this earlier on, if you really peep something about Black equals African people, If you really want to peep something real serious, we fear success. Black equals African people fear success, right? The pro-black perspective makes it clear again. Okay, the pro-black perspective says the show was Scandal. I never watched it, so I'm familiar with it, but I never watched it, so that would have never come to my mind when you said the fake president. He said Scandal was a show. It was pretty popular. Kerry Washington started it. Yes. Bobby Wright says, and not only that, Kokou, you have to watch a less experienced Mzungu advance ahead of you. Absolutely, brother. Absolutely. That's another one of those. That's another way that they let you know every day. These mofos will have you train some white dude who has less experience, talent, knowledge than you, and you're training that person to be your manager, to be your overseer in one of these plantation jobs. It's a wonder black folks, black equals African folks aren't crazy at this point. This is why you have to get this domination up off of you. You feel me? You got to get this up off of you. Because one of the byproducts of this domination is that we're not even, for the most part, we're not even like sound in our success. We fear success. Let me show you all of those. And again, this goes back with that scarcity mindset. Let me show you something. I used to have a period of time where, and it comes from my upbringing. It comes from growing up back in the Caribbean. I'm going to be honest with you. When I was growing up back in the Caribbean, there were times where you will hear people, if not yourself, you'll hear other people say, man, I want to buy this fried fish or something here, this fish dinner or whatever. But if I spend this money, boy, I might have to walk to work next weekend. Like, that's the kind of shit we came up under. Right? The worry if I spend this dollar for something I really want to enjoy, I might have to go to extra labor next week because of it. That's because we don't run our own shit. And so we always have this fear. Right? There was times in my life where I wouldn't put down certain money to get certain things done. And the last couple of years, the last 5 or so years, I've gotten over that stuff. Spend that money. You'll get more money. Have confidence in yourself. Have faith in yourself and your abilities. But if you have to spend that money to help you grow something, to help you grow your business idea or whatever, go ahead and go do it. Stop fearing success. So we talked about the imposter syndrome. We know what it is now, in case you didn't know before. We know how to identify it in others and ourselves, and we know what's the big cause of it when it comes to Black equals African people. What are the solutions to it, though? Especially for Black equals African people. What are our solutions? In no particular order, I wrote these down. Number one, again, no particular order, but it's 10 of them, so I'll just give them my number. Change your mindset about your own abilities. Right? The fact of the matter is, you have earned your place, you have the knowledge, you have the skills, etc., etc. So now think about yourself as a person with the skills, the knowledge, etc., etc. Look today, I posted this on Twitter today, and I'm going to show it again on Shoot the Breeze coming up. My good friend Kevin Carre 42, who you guys know, he's always on the panel for Shoot the Breeze, and he follows a few of us on Twitter. Stopped by today to show me his magazine, because he's a photographer. He showed me his magazine. He showed me his book he did. And let me tell you something. When I see you guys putting out your work, right? Be it your coffee table type book, your magazines, your films like Erzuli, Books like what Oni does, right? Recently putting out a word search book, which I didn't even think about. That's the thing that really kind of amazes me. Like I never even thought about that, right? When I look at Daily Affirmations by Pauline putting out a daily affirmations book, like that's the kind of shit I like to see. That's the kind of shit I like to see. Even if it doesn't sell well or whatever, or even if people don't receive it well, you had faith in your ability. You had the mindset that you could put this out and you did it. You did it. Kudos to you. Number two, for these solutions is measure your own achievements instead of comparing yourself to others. We too often, as Black equals African folks, are comparing ourselves to somebody else. Come off of that shit. Be happy for them, be happy for yourself, and keep it pushing. Number three, and this is the one that I had to really remind myself of. Remember that no one is perfect and that a person can only do their personal best. And that's going to be important in a few more solution notes here. It's going to be super important for you parents. You'll see why in a second. The fourth thing I jotted down, study Black equals African history. We have been great people in the past. We're still great people underneath this powerlessness that we're currently going through, right? Study the greats. Study the great things we did. This last episode I did on Tuesday, I'm going to do another similar paper from John Henry Clark, where he was talking about the slave revolts in the Caribbean. If you guys were there, you know what it is, right? Study that kind of stuff. Be empowered, be emboldened, be invigorated by what our people did. Not just Africans in the Caribbean, but Africans in America, who are some of the most emulated people, not necessarily for all the best reasons, but still, we have given much to the world, and so we need to study that, and we need to let that stuff push us forward even more. Number five, you probably knew this was coming, develop an abundance mindset. Get out of this scarcity bullshit. Get out of the scarcity bullshit. If you want to start that business, go and start the business. Make sure you advertise the business and so forth and so on, right? You'll make back the money that you put into it, one way or the other, right? Develop an abundance mindset. Number six, give yourself pep talks. What's one of the common traits of people, especially Black people who suffer from imposter syndrome? One of those things is negative self-talk. Start to speak to yourselves and your ancestors in a way that's positive, so you can get positive feedback from your mind, which is your ancestors talking to you as well. Bobby Wright in the chat says, especially judging our success by what the Muzungu says success is. That's an absolutely great point. That's an absolutely great point. You know, I've had to tell women that in the past. Don't judge me by no white boy. You understand? Don't do it. So you're absolutely right. Especially don't look at them and compare yourself to them. So this seventh point gets to the parents, and it comes from that third point I made. Parents, those of you who are parents out there, drop a one if you're a parent. There's two types of messages that can spark imposter syndrome in children. Constant criticism, which makes them feel like they'll never be any good or never be good enough. And two, and I suffered from that a little bit too. And two is universal praise. Oh, you're the smartest kid in the world. All that does is give them these high expectations and puts a bunch of pressure on them. So you parents, a lot of this shit that we go through, again, like I said about Caribbean folks, you come here and they tell you straight up, now, you know you have to work twice as hard now. Well, damn. Thanks for the high expectations and the pressure. The pro-black perspective is apparent in the chat. Constant criticism. Get that out. We tend to do that shit heavy. Stop it. Universal praise. That's what these white folks do. Oh, good job, Timmy. Timmy ain't shit. You all done a baseball field or soccer or soccer field or something like that. Oh, good job, Timmy. Timmy ain't doing another damn thing. And then you wonder why Timmy is coked out in the future. Not that I care about Timmy like that. What parents can do, you can prevent imposter syndrome by praising effort, and by helping children understand their strengths and weaknesses. Number 8 is fuck Whitey. Fuck this white boy. Like Bobby Wright said, especially stop judging our success by what the Muzungu says success is. Fuck this white boy. We don't care. We got to do what we got to do for us. Number 9 is just a simple thought. Just be positive. And have positive interactions with others. Number 10, and the last is my final one. You are an African. Enough said. Do I have to add anything to that? You are an African. There's something powerful about that. I want to thank you guys for tuning in tonight. I'm sorry I was a little bit late. I hope the sound was fine. Like I said, I'm doing this mobile from a different location than I would usually do my show. I hope you guys took something away from it. If you took something away from this conversation, hit me a 1. If you didn't, hit me a 2. Either way, I appreciate you guys for tuning in. Just a last reminder about this show being a part of a podcast network.
You are listening to the Bitter Medicine Podcast on KWAZ Radio.
This is D Webb with the Harsh Reality Podcast, asking you to tune in where we tackle the news of the day that affects our community, only on KWAZ Radio.
Peace, family. This is Oni, inviting you to listen to the pro-black perspective, where black problems are addressed with black solutions.
Greetings, fam. Tune in to The Learning Curve with me, the revolutionary matron on KWAZ Radio.
You are listening to the Bitter Medicine Podcast on KWAZ Radio.
All right, I see. I got a few 1s from the audience. I'm glad at least 2 of you. Got something from this. Bobby Wright says the sound is great, so that's good to know. At least that lets me know I could use this option in the future, no problem. All right, guys, that's it for tonight's show. I hope you guys leave some comments afterwards so we could continue the conversation a little bit more. If you want to suggest a topic for a future Thursday thoughts, by all means, drop that down in the comment section, and I appreciate all of you. I'll see you on Saturday night for Shoot the Breeze. You guys be good. Peace.
Thanks for listening to the Bitter Medicine Podcast with your host, Kokou. If you like what you just heard, we hope you pass along our web address, bittermedicineblogs.com, to your friends and colleagues, and share our show to all your social media. Be sure to check out our archive section on our website for previous podcasts. This has been a KWAZ radio production. Join us next time for another session of the Bitter Medicine Podcast. Follow us on Facebook at Bitter Medicine Show, Twitter, Bitter Meds, Tumblr, Bitter Meds, Instagram, Bitter Medicine.